Good morning, my name is Dewald from Emtelle, and we are this morning having a discussion with Sean Lombard, the IT manager from a company called Stay South Point, where they do student accommodation. We're going to be discussing the Wi-Fi deployment that we recently completed for them and is still ongoing as well due to the quantity of buildings. We are also looking back at the POC process that we've now gone through with the client for about 2 years, as well as how things used to be and how things are now. So Sean, very welcome and thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Dewald. It's a pleasure being here and sharing the experiences that we've had throughout the process.
So we've known each other for on and off 2 years now, I guess.
Yes.
And obviously from a supplier-client perspective, it's always complicated to get that relationship right and sort of the trust, I guess, at some point. So after all that we've gone through so far, I appreciate the fact that you're here. So thanks for that.
More than a pleasure.
But I want to start with you maybe just introducing yourself. Just sort of tell us who you are and where you fit in and your company.
So Sean and I work for South Point Management Services. We provide student accommodation around the country. Inception was in 2003, where a need was found that the accommodation that was being provided for students was really nasty and it was costing a fortune. And this is off-campus accommodation, so like in near vicinity of the campuses. We have housing for roughly 13,500 students countrywide. We have quite a footprint in Braamfontein, then Pretoria, Durban, PE, and Cape Town.
Yeah, all over the show.
Yes.
I'm also suspecting, if I consider when I studied, we kind of ran out of hostels.
Yeah.
And I think trying to get everybody educated led to the fact that we've got all these almost like private student buildings where people stay. Can any student stay there from any course, any varsity, or is it connected to something specific?
I would say the majority of our students are from NSFAS, the student funding program. There are private paying customers as well. We have some buildings that are more sort of exclusive, obviously at a sort of higher price. But the idea is that we give the same services throughout the buildings, that it's a clean, safe environment with reliable services for studying.
Yeah, and the count I've got is you have got 32 buildings?
35.
35 currently, all over the country.
Correct.
Now, one of the things I think, because we're in 2024, that I would very often describe is that Wi-Fi has become a utility. It's become very similar to water and lights, right?
Correct.
It's something that we simply can't not have. And we went through a period where we realized that the Wimpy is getting Wi-Fi because the Mug and Bean next door had Wi-Fi and everybody just sort of must have
100%,
this.
yes.
Where I think with students, of course, difficult because most of this, especially after COVID, became an online idea. And I think we're all leaning towards cloud services and online services and portals of some nature.
Correct.
So I reckon Wi-Fi is super important for your students, right?
Yes. So I've been with the company since 2022, and that was one of the first things that was impressed on me, is on how important the Wi-Fi is. I came from a different background, so I didn't quite understand the dynamic of how demanding the students were and what the need was for Wi-Fi. But it is definitely, like you're saying, it's a necessity for them. Not just for studying, I mean, the relaxing time and that, a lot of social media and that, they need Wi-Fi. So yes, it was impressed that it's really important that what Wi-Fi we do provide to our students, our tenants, is actually a top product, and we are better than the competitors.
Yeah, because I think there could be a lot of frustration in the sense that me and you both are sort of a little bit older. Let's just put a little bit older. What I'm implying is when I was a student, Wi-Fi was not really a thing.
No.
And I think we've had such a quick evolution over a couple of years where this has become to the point where I think all of us, we're almost expecting Wi-Fi everywhere. And you know, the whole question of, is it secure? Is it safe? Can I connect to it? Because again, in our time, online shopping was not really a thing.
It wasn't there.
You know what I mean? And I think we're still developing the idea that this is in fact safe and it's useful. Would you also agree that Wi-Fi, or probably having internet, has evolved way back from the time where we were paying per meg and we were paying for so much time on Wi-Fi, where these days we're almost expecting it to be uncapped and just free?
Correct. I mean, it's actually synonymous now. People don't even really call it internet anymore. It's referred to as Wi-Fi, which is a bit misleading, you know, from a technical perspective.
Correct.
You're trying to sort out problems in that, and people are referring to Wi-Fi. But yes, it's almost expected that it's unshaped, uncapped. You know, they want the freedom to do what they want when they want.
And would you also agree that most of what we would call our clients, even your students as your clients, I'm sure, have got no idea what it actually takes to get them this Wi-Fi? All they see is it's on or it's off, or it's working well or it's not.
Correct. Yeah, the technical details behind the scenes, they don't really worry about, and that's not their problem. What they're looking at is there reliable Wi-Fi, and that's all they're really interested in.
Yeah. Now tell me, what challenges or problems were you guys facing? And I would probably just call it in terms of connectivity. So in my mind, having internet, having Wi-Fi and everything that happens in the middle creates connectivity. But what sort of challenges were you guys facing, I would call it pre-meeting us, pre-going over to Ruckus?
Once again, the reliability of the Wi-Fi, which is a big factor, was the big stumbling block. Unfortunately, there's, you know, part of the problem is device-specific problems, where tenants or students would be using older equipment, and they don't understand that that's actually what's causing a problem as well. But yes, there definitely was a problem with the equipment that we were using, with penetration into the rooms and the residents, as well as the quality of the Wi-Fi that they were receiving.
And what we found in the buildings that where we were involved so far is you've also got a scenario where almost all the buildings are built differently. You know, the complete layout, the amount of floors, distances, you know, physical geography. So I think our approach was and is always to really approach this from a heat map perspective, right? To first of all say, let's do proper planning and let's first look at the environment. And part of this heat map process is considering things like single walls, double walls, steel, glass, open spaces, all of that. Did you see value in that approach?
Yeah, absolutely. The heat map, won't mention the product use, but it's definite plus to using that beforehand, the analysis to actually understand that something as simple as a microwave in a kitchen, what problems that's causing for your RF signal in the building, which is something many of the, how can I say, less developed Wi-Fi providers would actually consider. They would just walk around and see where the signal's good, where it's not, but not taking into account the environmental impacts of, like you said, the walls, microwaves, electronic equipment.
And I remember, especially in the first building that we were involved with a POC setup, we ended up switching on the Wi-Fi and then detecting 536 rogue SSIDs. And then when you chuck in the microwaves and the normal environmental factors, this was very complicated.
Yes. Yeah, you can't obviously stop somebody hotspotting on their phone unless you actually own the device, but we don't own the resident devices. You know, it's bring your own device. So we can't dictate what is broadcast in the building. We just need to manage the interference that we're getting on our RF signal. And yes, that was definitely highlighted with your analysis of the building.
That was a massive problem. And I remember us going through, because I think the basic question here is, we've got a problem, we are trying to make this problem better, and we need to look at products or techniques to improve this. And I'm pretty sure you would agree that almost all vendors and all suppliers are going to tell you that they can do it, and that they're the best, and that they won all the awards, and they, all of that. I often call that fluff, because I think that's part of sales. That's just what one does.
Correct.
But there's a massive difference between saying that you can do it and actually doing it. My personal experience of Ruckus, this is one of the highlights for me, is what they claim compared to what is actually done is really very close to each other. And so it leads me to the question, so how was your experience when we were finished, when you had the Ruckus in play?
Okay, so we are still busy with the deployment countrywide, but the buildings that we have done, where we've faced the problems, as you mentioned, we had the POC, which was in an extremely difficult building with all the environmental impacts that we had there with, as you said, the rogue networks and whatnot, and the microwaves. But after implementing the Ruckus equipment, by far the best thing that we could have done. Many of the biggest complainers were actually singing praises.
Yeah, and the way I would measure it is to say, if we consider the amount of complaints, student tickets, right, or tickets logged, compared to the tickets logged afterwards, we were actually at some point saying, oh, is something wrong? What happened to the tickets? Is that the same experience you had?
Correct. You almost felt like there was something wrong, because there was all this noise before, which dissipated dramatically once the solution was finally implemented.
Yeah. And I think one of the things I would like to highlight was what we also experienced was an environment, an RF environment, where we realized that less is more. Very often we would see competitors feeling that the answer to bad Wi-Fi is just to add another access point.
Correct.
And there's not really planning much. It's a matter of really just adding it in somewhere, because look, we're going to have more signal. And I think what we found, and I think probably to describe this building, if I remember correctly, it was 14, 15, 16 floors, and we had about 950 odd students in this building with all of these rogue SSREs, etc. Now, why I'm highlighting this one? This was one of the bigger buildings. They're obviously buildings that's smaller and similar sized. But this was an interesting use case for me, due to the sheer number, the sheer size. And in Ruckus Emtelle terms, we've also got a concept where we would describe hospitality, being a hotel room, etc. And what caught my attention is how similar this multi-dwelling unit, this student accommodation, is to something like hospitality. You've still got a paying guest, you've still got somebody that wants proper, adequate service.
Exactly.
The layout is very similar, and it's interesting for me to see. I think your hotel guest is somebody that would be there for a night or two, where your student accommodation guy, this person stays there for a year. So this is super crucial to them that it works. So can I ask you, could you share some details about how the solution was implemented? How did you experience us installing the system, and probably the whole changeover? Because remember, now your students are also sitting with a certain mindset of how things are working. Communication issues, to explain to them what differs and when to expect what.
Okay, so sort of backtracking a bit, going to your less is more. The way we had it implemented in the first place was in the passages where the signal was supposed to penetrate into the rooms. And we wanted to put in a solution quickly to see, so that they could see that we were addressing the problems that they were experiencing with signal. So right in the outset, we just did a like for like. So wherever we had an AP access point before, we replaced it with the Ruckus unit, which you did advise against. You said we should be using the analysis and placing it in the correct location for the best signal penetration and spread, which we couldn't do on the outset because of the fact that we needed to implement something very quickly. So yes, even like that, there was a dramatic increase in the experience for the user, but because of the interference, because of the multitude of access points that we had in place, it wasn't optimal yet, but there was definitely an improvement. Then we went down the road of actually installing the network cables and the infrastructure behind the access points in the correct locations, and then putting the access points in those locations according to analysis that you ran right in the beginning. And yes, as mentioned, the complaints dramatically dropped.
But I do think we had a fair challenge communicating it to the students.
Yes, because there's that misconception that, you know, the fact that they don't have an access point in their room, they getting less of a signal, which is not the case with the Ruckus equipment. You could be getting a signal from below or above your floor because of the signal strength on them. You could be getting it from 2 rooms down type of thing. It's wherever the most optimal access point is for you to access. It's just the way it's managed, and the signal spread from the Ruckus access point was so much better than what we had with the previous access points.
And I think also a massive differentiator was the AI-driven, that Ruckus analytics. Because I think at that point one could start really zooming into a specific student's complaint and understanding whether the student is in fact even understanding what's going on correctly or not. Where is the student located? Is he roaming? Is he not roaming? So would you agree that visibility, that amount of understanding of what is happening on the network was a fair game changer?
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned some time ago, the per devices are obviously a big factor because it's limited to the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum. But with the analytics, you're able to identify what's happening with those sort of less capable devices. The analytics that you get from the Ruckus is truly outstanding. The fact that you can follow that student throughout the building, identifying where he is, what the challenges are that he's experiencing, and why he's experiencing those problems. That's obviously there's the internet usage which plays a part, and the analytics that we get from the Ruckus analytics as well on the actual surfing habits or application usage is fantastic. Because somebody that's saying that they can't access certain sites and then you go and check, they haven't been even bothering to look at those sites, they're just looking at YouTube or Netflix or whatever. So it's more a thing about personal experience that they're having. But the recabling of the network behind the access points, we obviously, based on the analytics now, we realized we didn't need as many access points. And we went from a figure of, I speak under correction, 248 access points that we were using before, and we implemented 103, if I'm not mistaken, of the Ruckus, which is less than half of what we had previously. Less interference now, optimal signal, the coverage was better, the throughput was better. Definitely a positive experience.
I believe we also saw simply from a management view into the controller and analytics, things like throughput, especially on 5 gigahertz, went up dramatically. You know, that it wasn't a small change, it was a really big change. I think for pretty much anybody in the world, we would still for quite some time be battling the 2.4 gig spectrum due to the limited amount of channels available. Would you agree that one of the biggest challenges that we had was the fact that every single radio is necessarily transmitting on a channel? And if you end up with a building with so many APs in a 3-dimensional aspect, you are going to contend for essentially airspace. Essentially, who's going to use the channel at what time? And I think this was probably one of the biggest wins that we could win, was to illustrate the fact that more is not necessarily better, because you need a proper RF design and you need a proper system that can manage that channels.
That's where the Ruckus was really outstanding. The fact that it's got the AI-driven signal changing. If it realized there's like overlapping spread of the signal, and that's what's causing channel hopping for a user as such, it really solved that problem. That sort of reduced the signal for the user that he was getting. If he was flipping between two access points, previously we would have had that user disconnecting the whole time, whereas with Ruckus, with the analytics and that AI-driven analytics, it solved that problem.
Would you say the overall experience for the students and for you as our client, meaning you are the first line of complaints, I guess, for your clients, would you say the overall experience has improved your situation?
Yes, absolutely. A happy client, obviously, for us means less complaints. And that's what we're really trying to achieve now with all the residents, is to give them the same experience that we saw working in the POC and then the deployment of the actual final solution.
Sean, Emtelle and Ruckus were your partners in this project. What were the key factors that led you to choose us and the product? Seeing that we've gone through an extensive, over many months, POC process, we were up against a very specific competitor, which I believe is a real competitor. What led you to feel that Emtelle and Ruckus is in fact the answer?
So in that POC building, the challenges we were facing there, Emtelle was really helpful, always willing to look for solutions, go the extra mile. Many late nights.
Many.
To find a solution, and a valid solution, not just patching over a problem, to actually resolve the issues that were at hand. The fact that you put in the extra effort made a huge difference. Yes, the Ruckus equipment, as I've said, it was far superior to the predecessor, so that wasn't even a consideration. It was replacing a home network device with an enterprise device. You can't even begin to compete, compare the two together. It really is a case of cheap is truly not better in this scenario. But the big standout factor was the fact that you guys were willing to put in those extra hours, and it wasn't just during the week, it was over weekends. We really received awesome support. Many WhatsApp channels and chats.
Yes.
So yeah, very impressed with the service.
Thank you for that. And how would you rate the Ruckus performance against the competitor that was in fact part of this POC process? And I think probably for clarity, we are quite used to doing POCs on a 3 or 5 or 10 AP basis. We did this POC in a complete building environment in totality. So I think we deployed 40, 50 APs somewhere there. We ran them for a good month. And in your honor, you also gave the exact same opportunity to the competitor in the same environment. It was probably one of the most real POCs I've seen in my life, meaning fair, 100% the same environment for both competitors. How would you rate, how did that work out for you, Ruckus, compared to what you've seen the competitor doing?
Okay, so that was, you were suggesting that we use the analytics to place the access points in the correct locations, and as you pointed out, we wanted to keep it fair. So we asked both providers, yourself and the competitor, to place the APs where the current unifiers were. Whoops, there I slipped who the predecessor was. But yes, it was so that there was a baseline. And you put your access points in exactly the same positions where the competitor did. And ironically, we were using the competitor's Wi-Fi analyzer in certain locations, identified problem areas within the building. And even that Wi-Fi analyzer pointed out that the Ruckus was better performing as far as signal speed, penetration through these wonderfully thick old Johannesburg building walls. So the competitor's analyzer actually weighed in your favor, that your access points perform better than the competitors.
That's wonderful. Can you share any specific feedback or reactions you've received from your students regarding the improved connectivity? Has anybody made comments about it, or is it mostly a matter of the complaints just went away?
Yeah, it's generally, unfortunately, it's generally the perception that if we're not getting complaints, then it's performing well. For instance, in that building where we did the POC, we only had 16 or 18% respondents on the survey, comparing the predecessor and then both of the competitor solutions. But yes, the Ruckus there won again. The figures from the respondents that did reply were more positive for the Ruckus as well. And as I said, the analytics we used from the Wi-Fi analyzing of their equipment and weighing all that up together, yes, Ruckus was the winner. But unfortunately, as far as comments from residents or students go, very limited, because if it's working, they've got nothing to complain about.
Exactly. And would you say that the improved Wi-Fi would be a factor to retain the student easier? They would rather choose my building, or they would rather stay in my building compared to the way that it used to be?
Yeah, there's one of the key factors. Obviously, there's condition of the building and all of that, but Wi-Fi is really important to the students, as I'm impressed. With all the social media, what they want to watch at night, that type of thing, Wi-Fi is really important for our students and residents. So yes, I would believe it's a good factor to retain them.
An interesting aspect that I picked up was that the most usage, the most popular time of day usage, seems to be anything from 11 o'clock at night till 1 o'clock in the morning.
Correct. It's definitely the peak is evenings. But yes, you've got to understand that they are students, so they're more than likely on campus and that. So it starts heating up from about 3 in the afternoon when they're returning. And very interesting to see what is actually the most popular applications or platforms that they're going to.
Absolutely. And without giving details, let's just say it's not what you would expect.
Correct.
And Sean, we also introduced CloudPath, the onboarding system, which we can't solely say that it's due to CloudPath that we are onboarding, because we've also got your own custom-made software platform that takes the student through a complete onboarding journey from day one all the way until he's in his room and signing of agreements and acceptance and so on. But CloudPath is sitting and providing the student essentially with a certain number of devices and a certain onboarding methodology with a token. What was your experience of CloudPath if we consider things like network access? How to get the student onboarded due to your parameters that you guys feel is of course important?
Yeah, so it's obviously a CloudPath being a cloud-hosted service. It's essentially to provide the user with a key or password token to get onto our Wi-Fi network. And it's got to be an individual key per resident. He's limited to the amount of devices he can use. We were using a different product in the past with the predecessor access point, which we did have problems every now and again where for some other reason that platform would be limiting their bandwidth, or it would be causing issues with the amount of devices that are connected. The CloudPath solution seems to have taken that away. As long as our platforms on our side are actually asking for the keys and that from CloudPath, it's seamless. You can actually identify if the user is using multiple devices. You can see which device is using where and what type of signal he's getting where, what the problems might be on those devices, because he is associated with an independent key. So your CloudPath platform, what that did offer us is from our application that we use for our students, although that is busy migrating to a different platform at the moment, CloudPath stayed the same. The students are offered a DPSK,
dynamic, it's a
pre-shared
dynamic
key,
pre-shared
yes,
key.
from a pool that we configured. Well, you guys configured it for us, which offers each individual user security, their own password, which is linked to the devices that they're using. Obviously, we face the problem now with randomized MAC addresses, which then a student that's using one device might look like he's using 5 because his MAC address is changing. But thankfully, Emtelle came to the party and found a solution with that, with Ruckus, to reduce those devices again, bringing the device count down for that user, that the randomized MAC address problem is not a problem for the CloudPath platform or the user.
And I think to elaborate on that, the beauty of this is because we've got full API integration into CloudPath, into the system controller, etc. Everything is customizable.
Correct, and it's not a unique API. It's you using RESTful API that's easy to understand. It's, you don't need a degree to actually write the code for it to actually get the key from the CloudPath platform. And the fact that the user is actually getting that peace of mind with security, well, I hope they are.
They are.
For them, the peace of mind, yes, that they are getting that added security.
You see, one of the main attractions for us as an IT provider as well is understanding the fact that students are literally busy learning the world of IT, some of them, right? That's what they are studying. And if you want to see anybody break something or try and hack something, it's going to be them.
Correct.
And one of their favorite things to do is, of course, to try and hack my buddy in the room next door. And I think that is one of the massive advantages for us with CloudPath, because this is so unique. We're not only addressing access control, we're also addressing the security requirements and making sure that everybody stays safe.
Correct. The benefits for the users are really outstanding. The fact that they are getting a key for themselves, as long as they're not sharing with buddies and that, it really dramatically increases their security on the network.
So essentially, if we take the fact that we can see the controller management plane, we can see the analytics, we can also see the CloudPath, would you agree that we've probably got the most visibility into what is actually going on in real time? And I would like you to compare this, because I know that you're a man with lots of experience of also other scenarios. Would you say you've ever seen something similar or better?
Definitely not better. There's some that come close, like the other competitor that we were testing you up against. They have a similar solution, but definitely not as in depth with the analytics. Your platform definitely pinpoints the location of the user where he's possibly experiencing any problem, and quicker resolution to any issues that you are facing.
When we went through this journey of POC and deployment and so forth, were there any standout moments for you, memorable moments, humorous moments, something that you would say, you know what, that happened?
Look, trying to get old stuff to work with new is not advisable. I would say you need to look at the underlying factors. You guys pointed out many times to us that, you know, it's not just an access point issue, it could also be underlying network, where we would refute that and say, no, our network was working fine, but we knew there was a problem. So yes, once we actually put the effort in and redid the underlying infrastructure, it actually helped a lot. We should have taken your advice right from the word go. But yes, it's laughable now.
But there were some stressful moments there?
Yes, because it's trying to pinpoint where the actual problem is, and yes, your underlying infrastructure plays a big part as well. You can't run a Rolls Royce on Mari biscuit tires, you know. You've got to have adequate backbone for the premium product that we are putting on.
And Sean, tell me from your experience or environment where you are finding yourself, how do you see the future of student accommodation? Probably considering technology as it stands and maybe where it's going.
Well, I'm just hoping the student devices are actually more capable to actually take advantage of the benefits that they would get from our Wi-Fi network. I really hope that you know, suppliers around the country are going to stop selling these old devices that aren't capable of even Wi-Fi 5, you know. They're still focusing on the 2.4 gigahertz network, which is saturated, as you pointed out, and there's lots of problems there. To really get the benefit of Wi-Fi, not just in our building, but anywhere in the world, you need a device that's capable. So I truly hope in our student accommodation and our residents that the devices that are being used are actually more capable.
I think that's a very valid topic, because I think one of the things we've identified is that we are dealing with a very high proportion of probably very old devices, 10 years, 12 years old, and I think the way technology is going, even if a device is 3 or 4 years old, you have still got massive limitations. And we probably also identified the fact that a lot of these devices are only 2.4 gig capable still yet today.
Correct.
So I would probably agree with you that the user device is a much bigger drawback than what is physically available on a network switching layer or a cabling layer even, and definitely on an AP layer. Can I ask you, what would you say to other student accommodation providers who are considering similar projects or is sitting in a similar situation?
If you are offering a valuable service or planning on offering a valuable service as far as Wi-Fi goes, I definitely wouldn't consider using home devices as an enterprise device in your building. If you want to offer a premium service, then you should use a device that's capable, like the Ruckus. Using the cheap replacements is not a solution. The person that's going to suffer in the end is the actual resident or student or user, whatever scenario it is. I would say rather put money in your infrastructure and make the services that you're offering to your students, residents, more valuable.
Because the fact is, it's not a cheap exercise.
It's an investment.
It's an investment.
Really
it's a long-term thing.
Yes.
And I believe all of our logic would dictate that, you know, you don't want to do this every year. You're probably thinking at least 3 to 5 years worth, and you definitely do not want to spend all that money and effort and then have unhappy clients.
Correct. There's that Afrikaans saying, "Goed koop is duur koop." Definitely applies here. You know, I don't know how you would even begin to translate that into English, but no, cheap is really not the way to go. I'm not saying it's over the top expensive. You get bang for buck. If you're willing to spend the money to have a premium product, that's the type of service you're going to be delivering. You are going to have a premium service then. And it comes back once again to the fact that you don't have to put in more APs to offer a good service. Generally, you use way less devices than the cheaper competitors and providing a better connectivity solution to the users of your devices.
Can we summarize that by basically saying that planning is actually much more important than rolling it out?
Yeah, 100%. If you know what you're trying to achieve right from the outset and how you're going to achieve it, rather than sort of finding a solution as you go along, the planning is definitely mandatory. You should do that right from the outset. Before you even do your network cabling, you should understand what your Wi-Fi heat map is going to look like, so that you can deploy according to that.
And I think a topic that very often gets missed when doing this planning is to understand what this network is for. What are the applications that would be running on this network? Are they connecting to the cloud? Are they local, etc.? So one needs to consider network traffic and what this user is going to do with this network, and not just accept the fact that a network's a network.
Yeah, definitely by far the majority of the consumption is on cloud platforms. They would like us to believe that it's on educational platforms, but unfortunately the biggest consumption, well, applications are things like WhatsApp, Netflix,
TikTok,
and a lot of it is used for streaming and that.
Yes.
That's definitely by far the largest consumption on our networks. And we're talking about terabytes in a month, not just a few gigabytes.
100%. Yeah, I think we picked up the terabyte usage. It's an incredible amount of bandwidth that's being consumed.
Correct.
I think to close down, how would you feel about the Wi-Fi network switching cabling, let's call it the LAN portion, when comparing that also to the performance of the firewall and the internet coming in and so forth?
So it's obviously, if your access points aren't capable of using the bandwidth that you've got available, then you've got a mismanagement in your network. But at the same time, if you've got a thinner pipe going onto the internet and your access points are peaking at your firewall or your internet breakout, it's also counterproductive. So you need to work hand in hand with what your users actually require, what your APs or access points are capable of, and what your bandwidth allowance needs to be according to that. And obviously that's going to dictate what internet pipe you have going out. So trying to cut costs and having an underperforming network layer in the local network where you've only maybe got one meg uplinks and you've got 100 meg pipe, you're not ever going to be using that because your devices aren't capable. So everything needs to work hand in hand. And once again, you come back to the analytics and can actually tell you where problems are, what your consumption is. Truly important to have that visibility, which you do get from the analytics, which many other competitors don't have. Well, as detailed the product as what you guys do. Once again, planning is
wonderful.
Key.
Sean, thank you very much. Is there anything that you would like to add from your side to possibly give Emtelle any advice looking back?
Advice, I would just say continue giving the great customer service that you do. Retaining us as a customer is not an issue because of the service that you guys do provide us and the backup that you give us. And it's not a case of how you're going to charge us for the hours that you spent in support and help in that. You're always willing to help us regardless of the situation. And we're truly thankful for that.
Sean, thank you very much. We've had a nice discussion and thank you for your kind words as well. I think this was very insightful and it's great measuring our performance after the fact instead of the promises one makes before the time. So thank you very much for joining us and I wish you all the best.
Thank you. The fact is you did deliver on your promises. I'm just hoping it's beneficial to other clients out there that are looking for a reliable, valuable Wi-Fi solution.
Thank you very much.